Let's cut to the chase. Can you be healthy at any size? No. Is anorexic healthy? Absolutely not. How about this guy? No. Should you feel shame if you are at a body size outside the normal range? Does this represent some kind of moral failure on your part? Double no. And we're not talking about a little extra fluff here. There's no harm in that. You are not suddenly unhealthy the moment you can't see abs anymore. In fact, if you're active or strong, you can get away with even more fluff, if that's your thing. The body positivity movement exists to challenge the socially acceptable standards of body size, end the stigma, if you will, which is a good thing. We shouldn't be judging the character or value of a person based on their BMI, especially since we know that genetics, socioeconomic factors, and parents' education level are the strongest predictors of obesity and heart disease. The truth is that, in aggregate, it's far less a question of individual responsibility or willpower than the circumstances of one's upbringing. It's no accident that well-educated people from wealthy families have far lower obesity rates than the general population. They're not wealthy and successful because they live a healthy lifestyle and make good choices. They live a healthy lifestyle and make good choices because they're wealthy and highly educated. The problem is that instead of analyzing, exposing, and attacking the material roots of the obesity epidemic, the postmodern solution offered up by the body positivity movement is to normalize it, change the discourse to change the world. So in their eyes, the obesity epidemic is only a problem of social stigma. You see, the stigma is the problem, not the condition itself. You are valid. But in order to justify this narrative, they have to invent this whole ideology around how fat phobia is really derivative of colonialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. Yes, they really say this.
The title is 5 Facts to Fight Diet Culture. Trigger warning for me.
The idea that we cannot govern our own bodies is rooted in European colonization. Diet culture is not rooted in health, it's rooted in power.
Anti-fatness is rooted in anti-blackness, and the reason why people are pursuing thinness is because they're pursuing proximity to whiteness. The reason why people hate fat people is because people hate black people, and appearing curvier, bigger is associated with blackness, especially black women.
Fat people have to live in a world that openly hates them. They talk about solving the obesity epidemic. That means getting rid of people like me.
And so they have to deny and minimize the very real health risks involved.
Obesity on its own contributes to hundreds of thousands of premature deaths in the United States every year, and if we factor in its contributions to all of the major chronic diseases, the number is staggering.
Aside from all the common risk factors of disease that everyone already knows about, excess fat is also highly associated with low testosterone, which is very bad for not only men, but women as well. Testosterone helps maintain a number of important bodily functions in men, including sex drive, sperm production, muscle mass and strength, fat distribution, bone density, and red blood cell production. People with low testosterone often suffer from depression, poor sleep, reduced desire for sex, erectile dysfunction, and infertility.
I don't feel it is helpful to perpetuate a narrative that obesity has absolutely no harmful outcomes, because that is simply not true. The point is, we are assessing, is this an independent risk factor? So independent risk factor means, all other things being equal, does this contribute to dying earlier or a greater risk of disease like cardiovascular disease and cancer than not having it? And the answer pretty consistently in the meta-analyses is yes.
Obesity is a leading predictor of health outcomes in the modern age. Period. Full stop. It's just a fact. It's a fact of epidemiology.
So don't let anybody fool you into thinking being obese is the same as being healthy, but bigger. And for what? To make everyone okay with being sick and dying young. Great plan. At least we ended the stigma, am I right? When you put on a bunch of weight from poor eating and inactivity, like most people did during COVID, you don't need anyone to shame you in order to know there's a problem. You physically feel it. But the fat acceptance people gaslight you into believing you actually feel fine.
So one of the big points was always subscribing to the idea that I was fat, but I was healthy. Everything was fine, so I'm fine. I was really excited to finally feel accepted and to finally feel like my body was good. It was just unhealthy. And I didn't want to see that, and entering into the fat acceptance movement really made me blind to that.
They want you to deny your own senses and instincts because, you see, those feelings are just white supremacy infecting your mind with negativity. Instead, they actually encourage you to identify as a fat person. Internalize your obesity as if it were some transcendent, immutable part of your essence. These people are sick.
The identity dimension is also the key to understanding why the movement has become so popular. In a world devoid of politics, where half the country doesn't vote because nobody feels like their interests are being represented, and nothing ever really changes no matter who's in power, it wasn't always this way, identity becomes the substitute for community, meaning, and struggle. projecting the experience of alienation, atomization, financial insecurity, employment precarity, and lack of political agency, all that anxious energy onto questions of identity and social justice, instead of taking on the historical task of reorganizing society itself. Like all modern forms of identity politics, the body positivity movement promises community and a righteous cause to fight for. You can understand the appeal.
I'd had this health scare. My doctor came and saw me and he revealed that I had type 2 diabetes, which I had never received that diagnosis before. And he was basically like, look, you have to lose some amount of weight in order to deal with this, or you're going to have to be just permanently on medication for diabetes, probably for the rest of your life.
I held myself back from losing weight because I thought I was making like this political statement, right? And I was being such a rebel, and that I was part of this fat acceptance movement and no body shaming and loving and accepting myself. But
I wanted to belong to some sort of community, and
what I found was that I was being pushed out of these spaces where body positivity activism was happening. People that I really admired, other writers, body positive writers, fat positive writers, I was being asked to leave these spaces because I first of all felt that there were some scenarios where it was acceptable to want to lose weight.
And what has happened is any plus size person who's ever lost weight in this space has been viciously attacked by this community.
I thought that they were all about accepting yourself, loving yourself, loving your body, no body shaming, all of these very good things.
So body positivity and the fat acceptance movement was supposed to be all inclusive. They're supposed to be like these loving people, but I'm being kicked out of it.
The more I was in it, the more I saw how judgmental they were. If you did decide to start losing weight and wanted to become healthy, they just like cast you out and they didn't want to have like anything else to do with you. And to be honest, I never really felt like I truly was accepted in that community.
I always felt like I was faking, like I was being someone I didn't like in order to get a group of people who didn't want to see me succeed to like me.
Remind you of any other popular subcultures based on dubious claims and bad theory who reliably engage in toxic behavior, thought policing, canceling, and excommunication?
So what the hell am I saying? Like most other useless ideas that passes activism these days, fat acceptance and body positivity are ultimately examples of a defeatist ideology. Instead of finding ways to change current negative trends that are literally killing us, it asks us to accept these trends and pretend they're good, actually.
They're just putting a social justice spin on a social illness for the benefit of agribusiness and the fat acceptance industry. And there is an industry. Don't believe me? Here are just a couple of concrete examples of how capitalists effortlessly deploy radical woke discourse aimed at children and college students, not to facilitate the transformation of society or challenge the status quo, but to legitimize it, give it a fresh, progressive veneer, and pad their bottom lines all at once.
I got us donuts. Those are so bad for you. Oh no, are they moldy? I mean, are they poisoned? Are you allergic? No, I'm just saying. You're judging my food choices based on a false standard of health again, aren't you? Guilty.
Diet culture, fat phobia, and systems of oppression have created false hierarchies of food, and it shows up everywhere.
For instance, harmful thought patterns like earning food through exercising, or that dessert is the reward for the punishment of eating vegetables.
Remember that you do not need to earn food.
We are all incorrectly taught from a young age that our size, and therefore the foods that we eat, are markers of our self-worth. Moralizing food can lead to harmful relationships with food and disordered eating.
Instead of focusing on good and bad choices, try to approach food with neutrality in mind.
The only foods that are bad for you are foods that contain allergens, poisons, and contaminants. Or food that is spoiled or is otherwise inedible.
Eat without guilt, regardless of what society says.
Eat without guilt, regardless of what society says. This is literally a corporate op in order to normalize like eating junk food. By the way,
social justice language to run a corporate op to be like, eat our Oreos.
Well,
buy more Oreos.
What the video neglects to say is that the nutritionist who goes by literal black nutritionist, talks about quote unquote systems of oppression and all of this, is a senior nutrition scientist at Mondelez International, spun off from Kraft Foods, and makes the foods like Chips Ahoy, Oreo cookies, Sour Patch Kids, basically all sugary junk food
Delicious
and snacks.
things, but not
so
good for you.
The crazy thing, Crystal, throw this next one up there on the screen, which is that part of her job description is quote, innovation opportunities and driving the scientific evidence strategy to promote brands and support the business. As in, to use her quote, black nutritionist label to try and normalize amongst this growing movement the idea that there's no such thing as good and bad food.
This is pure ideology. Don't fall for it. Whether it's the current state of your body and mind or society itself, you can do better, we can do better.